My garden was never just a simple collection of soil, plants, and flowers. It was the heartbeat of my home, the pride of my corner at Chestnut Bend, and the place where I poured not just water and compost, but my emotions, my hopes, and my countless hours of dedication. Every leaf held a memory, every flower held a story, and every patch of soil carried the sweat of my hard work. When neighbors walked past my house, they would slow down just to glance at the rows of royal blue hydrangeas that guarded the front gate like soldiers, while the tiger lilies near the porch swayed like they were dancing in the rhythm of a silent melody. The air was often thick with the enchanting aroma of blooming jasmine, and even children from nearby streets loved to linger outside just to inhale the freshness that seemed to escape from my little paradise. It wasn't just a garden, it was a living piece of art that made my house feel like a home. Yet in a neighborhood where envy sometimes traveled faster than appreciation, my paradise was soon to become a battlefield. Among all the people who praised my work, there was one neighbor who looked at my garden not with admiration but with bitterness in his eyes. He had always considered himself the most respected man in the block, but ever since my garden started, drawing attention, he felt like his pride was shrinking. At first, it was in the little things. He would walk by with a stiff face, avoiding eye contact, or he would mutter under his breath about how gardens were just a waste of time. I ignored it, thinking that perhaps he was just not the kind of person who enjoyed beauty. But deep inside, his envy was growing like a silent storm. One day, the conflict took a small but unforgettable turn. He came to my gate carrying a plant of his own, a rather unimpressive shrub, and tried to convince me to plant it in my garden. He said it was a symbol of unity between neighbors, but I could see through his false smile. That plant didn't belong in my carefully designed layout. Its roots were invasive, its look unmatched with the elegance of my roses and lilies. I politely declined, explaining that it would disturb the balance of my garden. That rejection, though simple for me, was a spark of fire for him. His pride was wounded, his ego scratched, and from that day I noticed his stares becoming sharper, his silence heavier, and his greetings vanishing altogether. I should have known then that something darker was brewing inside him, but I never imagined how far he would go. Days passed, and my garden continued to flourish. New buds bloomed, butterflies danced in the air, and the soil seemed to reward me for my care with endless waves of life. I remember standing one evening under the golden sunset, admiring how the rays lit up the dew on my plants like diamonds, scattered across velvet. It was the kind of peace that makes you believe the world is kind, but peace, as I would soon learn, is always most fragile when envy knocks on its door. It was a quiet morning when disaster came uninvited. I woke to the sound of rustling, not the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind, but a chaotic, heavy shuffle, like something large was moving through my plants. My heart tightened as I rushed outside, and the sight that met my eyes stole my breath away. Dozens of goats, yes, goats, were stomping, running, and chewing their way through my paradise. Their hooves crushed the soft soil, their teeth tore at the delicate petals of my roses, and their bodies rammed into my carefully arranged pots. My jasmine vines, the pride of my evenings, were being ripped apart, strand by strand. Hydrangeas that once stood like blue soldiers were now nothing more than broken stems lying in the dirt. It was chaos, a brutal storm of destruction unleashed right in the center of my sanctuary. I shouted, clapped, and tried to chase them away, but goats aren't like birds or cats that flee at sudden sounds. They were stubborn, wild, and determined to destroy. My heart broke with every second. I ran from one end to the other, trying to pull them away, but they were too many. Their sharp cries mixed with the crashing of pots, the breaking of branches, and the tearing of leaves. My paradise was falling apart before my eyes. And then, as if the chaos wasn't painful enough, I saw him, my neighbor. He stood just a few steps away, arms crossed, watching with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. His eyes glowed with the satisfaction of revenge, his lips curled into a smile that carried cruelty rather than joy. In that instant, I understood everything. This wasn't an accident. These goats weren't wandering strays. He had brought them, released them, and now stood there savoring every ounce of my pain. My blood boiled, my fists clenched, and my voice cracked as I screamed at him, but he only tilted his head, shrugged, and said, "It's just nature doing its work." The sheer arrogance of his words made my chest tighten. I felt anger like I had never felt before. Yet I couldn't allow myself to lose control completely, because my garden, what was left of it, still needed me. I grabbed a stick, flung it in the air, and managed to scare a few goats toward the gate. Slowly, painfully, I forced them out one by one, my body trembling with rage and despair. When the last goat finally stumbled out of the gate, I turned to look at the wreckage. My heart sank deeper than words can describe. The garden that once looked like a painting now looked like a battlefield. Broken pots lay scattered. Flowers were shredded into unrecognizable pieces, and the soft soil was nothing more than trampled mud. Tears welled up in my eyes, but behind those tears, a fire was burning. This wasn't just an attack on my plants. It was an attack on my soul, my hard work, and my peace. And in that moment, one thing became clear. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a war I had never asked for, but one I was now determined to fight. The morning after the incident felt heavier than usual. My garden, once the pride of Chestnut Bend, was now nothing more than a battlefield of chaos. The dew that usually kissed the petals of my flowers was replaced by mud and hoof prints. Where roses once bloomed like crimson fire, there were now snapped stems and scattered leaves, lying lifeless as though mourning their fate. The sun tried to shine as it always did, but even its golden rays could not wash away the ugliness of betrayal that now clung to my home. I had spent years perfecting this sanctuary. Each corner of the garden was carefully designed, jasmine vines climbing elegantly over the wooden arch, hydrangeas lined along the path, tulips bursting with colors of spring, and a small fountain that sparkled in the afternoons. It was my heart outside my body, and to see it destroyed in just a few hours by a herd of goats, released intentionally by a neighbor I trusted, felt like watching a dream crumble to dust. The anger inside me was boiling, not because of the goats, but because of the malice behind their release. He hadn't just let them wander. No, this was calculated. A punishment for a simple truth I had spoken, a boundary I had drawn, a line he refused to accept. For days I walked through the ruins of my garden, my fists clenched, my heart torn. Neighbors came and shook their heads, some with sympathy, others with whispers of gossip. "How could she let this happen?" they said, not knowing the poison that grew in the heart of the man who lived 2 houses down. But I knew, and my resolve grew stronger with every broken flower I picked up from the ground. I cleaned what I could, trimmed the destroyed bushes, replanted where there was hope, but it was not enough. My garden deserved justice. My soul demanded revenge. And so I waited. I watched him from behind my curtains as he strutted around his yard, pretending to be innocent. He thought his act had gone unnoticed, but I saw the smug grin he carried every time he glanced at my broken fence. He enjoyed my suffering, and that made his downfall certain. Slowly, I began my plan. I learned his routines, the times he left his house, the moments he slacked in his yard. I discovered his pride, his newly planted vegetable patch, rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and beans. It wasn't much, not nearly as grand as my garden, but for him it was everything. He often bragged about how he would harvest better crops than anyone in the neighborhood. It was his weakness, his soft spot, and I knew exactly how to strike. One night, as the moonlight bathed the street in silver, I set my trap. The same goats he had used against me would become my soldiers. I borrowed them with ease, for they roamed freely beyond the fences at times, and guided them straight to his vegetable patch. The sight was poetic. The goats storming through his garden, munching on his precious plants, trampling over his efforts without hesitation. By morning, his once proud patch was nothing but dirt, scattered leaves, and broken stems. I stood by my window, sipping my tea, watching him scream in rage, his hands pulling at his hair as he cursed and shouted. The look on his face was the justice my heart had longed for. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about teaching him the value of respect, of boundaries, of kindness. Over the next weeks, I rebuilt my garden with more determination than ever. I brought in rare flowers, strengthened my fences, and created a beauty that no storm, no man, and no goats could destroy again. My garden rose from the ashes like a phoenix, brighter and more radiant than before, a testament to resilience and patience. And as it bloomed, the whispers in the neighborhood changed. People who once shook their heads now admired the sight, calling it a miracle of Chestnut Bend. Meanwhile, my neighbor struggled to replant his patch, but every effort seemed weaker, smaller, and less fruitful than mine. He avoided my gaze now,